Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your weekly home for all things related to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each week I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and recruiters who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is the show I wish I had a decade ago when I graduated. This week I speak with author and BBC talent manager Elsa Sharp as we cover how to get a job in television. If you've ever thought about a career in TV, then brace yourself, as over the next 30 minutes, Elsa will fill you in on everything you need to know. It's well worth listening to no matter what you're applying for, as Elsa's insights into work experience, networking, and the importance of having the correct attitude are applicable across all industries. So sit back, relax, and let's crack on with episode 13. Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast. I'm excited today to be speaking to Elsa Sharp. Elsa is TV talent manager at BBC Factual and the author of How to Get a Job in Television and Get In and Get On in Television. Elsa, a very warm welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast.
Thank you very much. Pleased to help.
So I've given our listeners a very brief introduction, but before we jump into the topic today of how to get a job in television, would you like to introduce yourself properly and tell us a little bit more about your 20 years in the industry?
Okay. I am a talent manager, as you said, in BBC documentaries within BBC Factual. I work with Aisha Raphael, who's head of documentaries, and the two executive producers there, Sasha Mirzoff and Fergus O'Brien, staffing documentaries for BBC 1, 2 and 3. I also work with Anna de Moraes, who's head of central development within the BBC, and Samantha Anstis, who has a creative label which also makes programs for channels across the BBC. I started life as a journalist and trained as a journalist before I became a researcher in TV. It was just a lucky chance opportunity that I ended up in the industry because it certainly wasn't a life plan. I did a postgraduate certificate in journalism at the London College of Printing, which I think is now called the London College of Communication. Because I was freelancing for magazines and I had done training in layout and proofreading and subbing for for magazines. When I started, I was working as an editorial assistant on a trade magazine, and I wanted to upskill when I was freelancing as a journalist. And on the course, I met another student called Anna Richardson, who is now a TV presenter. She presents things like Supersize versus Super Skinny and is a presenter on Channel 4. But back then, she had been a researcher or a work experience runner type person on a program in Manchester for BBC North, and she was desperate to try and get into TV as a researcher. So she was doing the course to enable her to get on in TV because she felt that journalism would be useful. And during the course, we became friends, and afterwards, when it finished and I was freelancing, she was going for researching jobs, and one day told me that she had gone to see a company called Wall to Wall about working on a music and entertainment program, and that she had struggled with all the questions and found it really difficult and didn't want to do the job. And I thought it sounded quite interesting because at the time I was freelancing for the different music papers, and thought, well, actually, sounds quite good for a regular job. So I applied and had two or possibly three interviews, actually, because I didn't have any TV experience. And eventually they gave me a break as a junior researcher, and then I ended up staying on the program for 8 months and becoming a researcher. And then I started freelancing for other companies and became an AP and then a producer-director and then a producer and series producer for various companies. And then I worked in development for a few years, and after I had children, I came back to a development role at an indie called Zigzag, and it was a hybrid sort of talent manager, development producer role, part-time, which is what I wanted. And I ended up then becoming a talent manager, and I've been a talent manager for the past 10 years. And have worked for various companies, including Dragonfly, Firecracker Films, Raw Television, and I've been at the BBC in the factual departments for 2 years now.
Wow. And TV is a notoriously difficult industry to get into, and one where there's not a set career path. So starting at the beginning, imagine I'm a fresh-faced student about to graduate and would love to work in TV. Where do I start?
Well, I think it does seem very daunting if you're outside, but I think it's a combination of three things: tenacity, luck, and persistence. Where would I start? If I was keen to get into TV now, I would make a list and be very methodical in my approach. I'd make a list of all the TV companies whose programs I watched. I'd know their output inside out. I'd know who made the programs, and you can do this by looking at the end credits and looking in, certainly on the websites for the BBC programs, and they list their execs and the producers and the production company that makes the program. And I would write to those companies and ask to do work experience. I mean, I know very successful producers who were doing work experience while they were still at college. If you can't get a work experience placement, you can temp, you can get into different organisations in broadcasters themselves and indies by joining temping agencies that supply administrative, legal and secretarial staff. That's another option. And of course, the BBC has a number of new entrant schemes. They have the production talent pool, which they select about 300 people a year to come and do different jobs within the BBC, almost like an internal temp pool. They run the production trainee scheme and a number of apprenticeships, which are all listed on the BBC website. But I would just basically decide which area of television interested me in trying to get as much experience, paid and unpaid, as I could. Also sending ideas for programs or access or ideas for films is also a good way of getting the attention of a producer and showing them that you're thinking along the right lines.
The majority of our listeners are current students or recent graduates. And without wishing to upset a load of them, how important do you think it is to have a degree in terms of getting into TV? Are there any necessary qualifications, or is it just more, as you mentioned, about work experience?
I think for the most part, you're expected to have a degree to work in television. I don't think it particularly matters whether it's a degree in TV production. I think obviously if you've been to Bournemouth or Leeds or one of the centres of excellence or a skill set approved course, they're really, really useful and very practical and well thought of courses. But I think you can do, I've met and worked with researchers who've got a variety of backgrounds. So if you wanted to work in specialist factual areas like history or science, I think they're pretty key. It's pretty key to have a degree. But in other areas, I don't think the nature of the degree matters. But I do think that employers, whether they'll openly say it or not, do look for a secondary education and do look for people who've been through university.
You talk in Get In and Get On in TV, your book, about the value received from doing a postgrad in journalism. Do you recommend this route for everybody, or is it just more if you're interested in news and current affairs?
Well, I think if you are interested in news and current affairs, it's a given that you have to have the appropriate training in journalism, and especially in broadcast journalism. And often now I see a lot of people, because I occasionally find people for current affairs, who've got sort of MAs from City University and such like. I think it's useful, and certainly my postgrad degree certainly helped me and stood me in good stead, because all the things that it taught me are transferable, because TV research is journalism. You need to understand how to find a story and characters and tell a story. You need to understand how to write, how a narrative unfolds, how to hook the viewer, how to interview somebody, and those are all techniques and the training that I received on my course as a journalist. And so I do think it was really, really useful to me, and probably one of the best things I did, because after sort of, I think, a year in TV, I was writing scripts, and I think I would have found it a lot harder had I not done my news writing and different writing courses. I think also writing is really underrated. People don't realise that they need to be able to write, but it's an essential skill for development, being able to write. It's an essential skill for being able to write a script or to think of a narrative, to write voiceover. So it's certainly something that comes in handy later on. And actually there are a lot of people in TV who don't know how to write. Certainly people who write well are in demand, as well as being able to make, beautifully visual and creative looking films.
That's a skill that'll be able to stick with you for your career no matter where you take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So recognising that the range of jobs within the term television is huge, from in front of the camera to behind to production, editorial, technical, Is there a common set of skills and qualities which you think tie these all together?
Yes and no. I think I couldn't really say, because I think each job that you're talking about there, whether it's presenting or technical and craft or, the production management side of TV or the editorial, they're all very different skills, and you need to have a certain skill set and certain predisposition to succeed in those roles. The only thing I would say in terms of qualities, I think I could say that there are, a handful of qualities that you need that are universal across the board. And they're more about personality and the way someone is as a person rather than something that can be learned. Though, of course, you can always learn how to do certain things. One, I would say, is that you have to be incredibly creative, whether you're creative in the use of how to shoot something, if you're a cameraman, or edit something, but also how something might look as a director, or how you tell the story, or how you use your budget, and how you stretch your resources. Being creative is key, I would say. Being visual is key. Being collegiate and cooperative and being able to work in a team and lead a team and recognize other people's strengths and weaknesses. Being resilient and being able to cope with the long hours and under pressure and in the face of constant problem solving. I think that's key. Well, even as a freelance, you have to be resilient, because you might not get every job you go for, especially in the beginning. And you need to be able to bounce back and carry on. And that's the same with development, whether you're coming up with ideas and they're being rejected, or whether you're in production and you can't get access to the thing that you need to get access to, or to persuade those contributors to take part, or it's a constant set of unfolding problems, and being able to deal with them and think creatively and laterally, as well as not be frightened and put off. Those are sort of key skills. And being flexible, because TV isn't a traditional industry where you'll have traditional hours and 2 weeks off a year and paid holidays, and it's quite, you have to be prepared and understand and be happy to be freelance, because there's no job security, there's no safety net in some ways, and you have to be resourceful and good at managing your own finances and being prepared to win your own business and market yourself as a brand, so you continually are employed and you plot your own career path without a formal structure of progression.
You talked there about the importance of attitude and having the right attitude. I mean, chapter 1 in your book is entitled TV, Are You Tough Enough? And TV does have a reputation as being a challenging place to work with, as you mentioned, egos, long hours, stress. Is it a place for shrinking violets, do you think?
Well, I would probably say not. Shrinking violets, I know many intellectual, thoughtful, quiet producers. I know who are not madly extrovert, but I would say that there is a level of confidence and creativity and resourcefulness that most people in TV have, and I think you need to, it's also a job where each program has different needs, and therefore you need to employ different methods and think creatively about the challenges of making a particular program. And no one job, I found in my experience when I was in production, no one job really prepared me for the next. I mean, the only skills that you have are those of being able to find a story, track down people, persuade them to take part. And each time you work on a program, you're learning about an entirely different area, an entirely different group of people, and you have to be fearless and go into situations and talk to people and being able to face-to-face and on the phone and assess them quickly and work out where they might fit into a program and persuade them to take part. I mean, I do think you need to be to have an inner sort of strength. I mean, whether that means that you manifest as shrinking violets on the surface, that's one thing. But I just definitely think that the people that I see who are successful, and I meet, sometimes I'm interviewing all day, and I can meet 7 or 8 people a day. Some I've met before, some new people. But I think the successful people have a degree of resilience and strength and charm, and also a can-do attitude where they kind of, they're persistent, but without even thinking about it. They just get on with it.
Makes complete sense to me, and they're characteristics which in a competitive job market you need to have, that inner core strength and belief in what you're doing to put yourself forward for the job. Because if
and you
you walk into a job
blame
interview,
others and complain, you have to be flexible to ride with the changes. And I've worked on live programs, where you spend a week preparing a running order for a show and standing up guests, and then it could all change at the last minute, and you have to rewrite the whole thing again and find guests, and it can be, and you have to just say yes, okay, then you can't stick your heels in or complain or be fazed by that. I think it's just really is, and it's the people that roll with that who come up with solutions rather than problems, or who are the ones that succeed.
A canned attitude will get you a long way.
Yeah.
You touched on work experience earlier, and one stat from your book which surprised me was that a survey said that 70% of people in TV had relied on contacts to hear about their most recent job.
Yes,
I
wrote that was in my How to Get a Job in Television. I wrote that in 2008. It came out in 2009. Whether the statistics are still current is another thing. I suspect that things might have changed slightly with the advent of the internet and Twitter and Facebook and people advertising on social media. I think it's a little bit more transparent than it might have been 10 or 20 years ago in terms of opportunities. But the fact is, most jobs are never advertised. It does come down to who you know. It does come down to having a lucky break. Now, it might be that you know someone, by a completely fateful coincidence. I did meet somebody who worked in TV, but even she was struggling to get in. But it's how you make that opportunity work for you. And also, I've had friends of friends of friends contact me, and I've met with them. So, you can find your way without knowing somebody, but obviously it does help if you do, to make that first step.
And is Twitter now one of or as a medium, a useful one that people use to try and get in touch with yourself and, your colleagues? Is it a way that people can use it to try and get work experience in that initial situation?
Speaking for myself, most people tend to email me at the BBC or on my personal email address. I do have a Twitter account, and I do have followers on that, and I used to, when I worked as a freelance talent manager at various indies, I used to use it to advertise vacancies. I don't tend to so much because the BBC has its own platforms. It has the BBC Careers website. It has the production talent pool, and if you're in that pool, then vacancies are tweeted using Facebook for vacancies. So I tend just to advertise or not advertise. I tend to use emails, and that's the best way of contacting me. But yeah, my colleagues at various indies, they do use social media and on popular free groups on Facebook.
How important then is work experience in getting into TV? Is it a complete prerequisite for getting an initial job?
I would say it's pretty essential, but not because it's something you need to do. I just think it has a whole range of benefits. When you go to do work experience at a company, you might be doing, you're getting exposure to the production teams and the producers and the executives at the company. And that's your way to impress them, to network, to find out who's who, and to observe, what they're making, how they work, and to create a good impression. So when they're looking for a runner or a paid opportunity comes up, that they know who you are, because they're not going to give a break to someone that they don't know. And they're going to want to sense that you're going to hit the ground running if you're given the opportunity. So, it's a good way of going into different companies and meeting and working alongside researchers and producers, and they then will become your network. And through them you might hear of other job opportunities at other indies, or if you've done well and they're pleased with you, they might recommend you to their friends. And most people in TV are freelance and they move around. So even if you went to one indie and you're working with a group of researchers and APs, they might recommend you to others. So it's a really good way of creating, making your own contacts and creating a network, as well as learning how TV works and what different companies are like, because different companies have different personalities almost. They have different flavors. They make, depending on the type of programs they make, they'll have a completely different ethos or management style. So it's a good way of finding out what environment suits you and where you might best want to spend your time.
As a talent manager at the BBC, you mentioned you spend all day interviewing. You must see millions of CVs and covering letters and applications. What are the classic mistakes that you see candidates make when they apply to you?
Classic mistakes, probably overwriting, poor layout, not listing their skills and experience clearly, not listing what they did on the shows that they worked on. I'm not interested. Obviously, it's useful to have a summary sometimes, but the important things are the broadcaster, the production company, the exec producer, and the actual job title and how long somebody was on a project. Because those are all the things that I'm looking for. I'm trying to evaluate what sort of skills and experience that person has. And if they're not explaining it, or if they're using the CV to write irrelevant things about what the program's about, then it's a missed opportunity. And I think always a summary at the top, rather than a mission statement of listing the skills and experience that they have, is always useful. And people underestimate the benefit of, especially at entry level, of being able to drive, of having a clean driving license, of speaking languages, of being able to use a camera, any sort of relevant training like FCP training, or shooting, or writing, or journalism. Those are all key skills to put at the top. Spelling mistakes I find annoying, and if someone can't express themselves on a CV clearly and concisely and in a way that's well written, then I wouldn't probably consider them.
Do CVs and covering letters still cut it, or do people need to do something more creative? I mean, have you seen any creative applications, whether it's YouTube videos or short pieces of work that have worked well for you?
If people include a link to a short film or a link to YouTube or a Vimeo clip, I might often click on it. But really, I mean, I suppose speaking for myself personally, the first thing I'm going to see is the covering letter within the body of an email, so that's crucial they get it right in terms of telling me who they are, what they've done, and what they're looking for when they're available and who they've worked with. And then obviously the CV can tell me more. But obviously, if depending on, I mean, if it was a director who's made lots of hours, if I haven't watched the programs, I would then go onto their show reel to have a look at how they shoot and the documentaries they've made. In some ways, it's less important at junior level, unless, of course, I'm looking for a shooting researcher or someone who I know can shoot to a certain standard and handle a camera proficiently, or can do sound. I'd be looking for evidence of that.
You talk in the book about the golden rules of interviews. Could you just expand on what these are for us and how candidates can impress?
Golden rules. Well, there are a number of things. I mean, I'd start by saying that it's important to be able to express yourself clearly, to articulate what you've done in a concise way, to answer the questions that are asked of you, to do research about the company if you can, about their output, the kind of programs they make, and have reasons why you want to work with them, and have ideas and suggestions, and a clear sense of your skills and how they match what the employer might be looking for. When I meet people, I want to kind of get a sense of what they're like as a person, so I ask them about themselves and as well as the programs they've made, and so I just try and get a sense of how they work, and to get, and often I will ask for, if it's not on their CV, who they've worked with, and for telephone numbers, and so I want to, so when they've gone, I might talk to people that have worked with them about them. Obviously, that's sort of part of my job, is to collect references, but also the people they might not necessarily think that I would contact. The key thing is to go with preparation, to know. I mean, I've interviewed people who can't remember the name of the producer they've worked with, and it makes me think, well, how come you've forgotten, and B, did you really work with that person? Yep. So it's things like that. And also, if you prepare by watching the output, if you have any nerves, at least you'll be speaking from a position of confidence and knowledge if you're asked about programs you've worked on, as well as the programs that the company makes, because they want to know that you've written to them and that you understand their brand and output. And I think a big no is not to know the programs, and you definitely don't crib from looking on the internet at their company website, because that might not be up to date and it might be a little bit behind. Often, for example, when I was at Dragonfly, they had output going back 2 or 3 years, but they wouldn't have necessarily had the most recent output. And you should be showing in interviews that you watch television, that you've got an awareness, that you understand what's rating and why, and you know what you like and why. So, because it won't just be about your CV and what you've done, it'll also be, people who are interviewing are trying to get an understanding of how you think.
If you could go back in time, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old version of yourself who was about to start out in TV?
Oh my God, that's a hard question. Don't do it, I might say. I don't know. Be more prepared. I think my career in a way was based on the opportunities that were presented to me and the kind of, often you might get offered something by chance, or you might hear about something by chance, and I took the best opportunities that were presented to me. I think now it's possible to be a little bit more strategic because, then when I started out 20 years ago, there were never vacancies advertised. You heard everything through word of mouth. There wasn't the internet. Nothing. You couldn't research companies because there were no websites. You'd have to literally ring up the production manager. So if I was going back 20 years, if I wanted to work in TV, I would think that I would probably have tried to do a broadcast journalism degree where I would have learned how to structure a story and shoot and edit and, worked with lecturers to understand the language of television, of the visual medium. And I definitely see that the people who have done degrees at the National Film and Television School or Bournemouth, in TV production, they're the ones that come out fully prepared and they understand the industry. They understand how it works. They understand how to navigate it. They understand and have the skills that they need to work well. Whereas I feel I learnt them on the job, which is the hard way. I mean, it's good to do that, and most people do, but it's better to be prepared in a way.
A good practical degree course which has lots of time.
I think not just any media production degree course. I think there are certain ones that do who teach very good storytelling skills. And I've met lots of young people who've come out of certain courses, and they can actually make films. They can actually create a story rather than I wouldn't advocate media studies or any media degree. I would say a specific filmmaking degree or course. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's
what I would say to myself, that if I was serious about working in TV, then I wanted to make documentaries, and I made entertainment shows which I enjoyed at the time, and I'm glad I did. But I think documentaries and making films might have been a lot more interesting and rewarding.
Well, there's still plenty of time left.
Yes, thanks.
So moving on now to the quickfire round of questions. Which book, Elsa, would you recommend that listeners should read?
Well, this is a tricky one because I'm reading a range of fiction, and I wouldn't say they're particularly relevant, and also being probably a lot older than your listeners, I'd have to be really naff and recommend my own book without any kind of... because I genuinely think, I'm constantly sending my ebook out, just emailing it to people who write to me because I think it is so useful, and there are just so many tips in there that give a shorthand to just, to anything I could explain in an hour. And people say that the practical advice in it has really helped them, and I think that if you could read one thing, it's not the sort of the book which is 300 pages. The 30-page ebook just has everything in it, and it is really useful. It doesn't take very long to read, but it's just very handy and practical, brief advice, which tells you everything really.
Excellent. And which internet resource would you recommend to listeners? Again, could be anything, doesn't have to be job or TV related.
I really enjoy reading The Guardian. I read it online and as well as the paper copy. I just think the mixture of news and features and lifestyle and editorials I really enjoy. But of course as well, for your listeners, if they're wanting to get into TV, it advertises media jobs, but also gives you trends about what's going on in the industry and who's moving where and the larger themes. On a TV specific note, the one tip I would give, the one website that I use, and I know my talent manager colleagues use, it's our Bible, is a website called The Talent Manager where freelancers upload their CVs. And when I'm looking to staff productions, I always look there.
Okay, and I will link to everything that we've talked about today in the show notes. So listeners, you'll be able to get the links to that in the show notes on the website. And finally, what one tip would you recommend that people can implement today on their job hunt?
The tip that I would say is just to be resourceful and to never give up. And, if one door closes, just think around how you might find another door to knock on. And to do what you want to do without taking any setbacks or being put off. If you're really determined, with luck and persistence, you can get into TV.
That's great advice there, and one that's very true for job hunting market everywhere at the moment. Elsa, thank you so much for your time today. What is the best way for people to connect to you and the work that you do?
They can. I am at the BBC. People can contact or find me there or on Twitter. And I have a website, www.elsasharp.com.
And I'll link to that in the show notes as well, so people can
yeah, and maybe link to the BBC. Probably if you link to the BBC Careers website, that would be good, and then people can know when to apply for work experience, because that has to go through BBC HR and also the Production Talent Scheme.
Excellent, that's a good idea. So I'll make sure that I do.
Brilliant.
Many thanks again to Elsa for her time and insights. In terms of things for you to think about, the first for me is the importance of your attitude. To get on in TV, you need to believe in yourself and your ability. You're going to suffer knockbacks on your journey. You might have trouble getting that first break. Then when you do get started as a freelancer, you could find yourself out of work between projects for long periods of time. You're going to need a core inner belief in yourself and that you're going to succeed, that you're on the right path and you're going to get there in the end. Which links to what is becoming a bit of a constant theme on the podcast, the importance of knowing your own core values. Jennifer Holloway talked about it last week as part of the brand pyramid in episode 12. David Schindler mentioned it in episode 6. You need to know what you want from work and what is important to you. If the number one thing you value from work is a need for stability, a regular paycheck and 9 to 5, then working in TV probably isn't going to be right for you. Whereas the civil service might tick all the boxes. Conversely, if you're the sort of person who values change, the excitement of not knowing where you'll be working month on month, and gets a buzz from thinking on your feet and working under pressure, then working in live TV could be perfect for you. Now, there's no right or wrong answer here, but what you do need to do is sit down, spend some time, and think what's going to be right for you. The second key point for me is also on the importance of networking. As I said in the episode, I was surprised that 70% of TV jobs went to people they know. Now, even though if that stat is a few years old, it's still going to ring true. As a result, you need to get out there and get yourself known. Get in touch with Elsa. Hit up the movers and shakers in the industry on Twitter. I'm sure they're all on there. See a show you like? Tweet the producer and make contact. You need to be proactive and put yourself forward to be heard, because if you don't, somebody else will. For advice on networking, check out episode 3 with Richard Morn and ask his brilliant question, which I now ask all the guests on the show. Who do you know who? Who do you know who might be looking for a work experience candidate or a trainee runner or whatever it is that you want to do? It's a really powerful question to ask. As I said, at the end of each show, I ask each guest to have on, who do you know who would be good on the podcast? And it's a brilliant way to make contact with new people. Finally, the third point is also linked to point 2 and is on the importance of work experience. Now, it's true in television as it's true in all walks of life. People want to work with people they know, trust, and in particular like. Whether in TV, construction, consulting, if you're building a team, you always want to go first with people you've worked with in the past. As such, it's critical to get that work experience and to get your face in front of people. So, get networking, get out there, bag yourself some work experience placements. After all, that's what all those long university holidays are for. Right, episode 13, all sorted. You can find a full transcript of everything that we've talked about and all the links at graduatejobpodcast.com/TV. Please get in touch with us on Twitter at GradJobPodcast. And also, if you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. It's the best way that you can support the show and enable more people to find us and to get the credible help and advice that they deserve. So big shout out to Boo the Cat Lover, great name, who left a 5-star review this week and said, love the mix of guests and the insight they each bring. So thanks there to the listener who presumably likes cats. Now, if you've not already subscribed via iTunes or Stitcher Radio, you need to sort that out. It's the easiest way to get each episode delivered to you for free and to make sure that you don't miss a thing. So, I hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.